Living in Paris for 30 years as an expatriate New Yorker, veteran rocker and author Elliott Murphy's career in music and literature is more active than ever. He has released over 35 albums, still performs shows all over Europe as well as the US and Japan, and is a prolific author of fiction. Fly on the Wall podcasts would like to welcome Elliott Murphy to the show. Remember that this radio show is listener funded. If you wish to contribute, our PayPal info is notyourmothersradio@gmail.com. That's notyourmothersradio@gmail.com. We would like to thank you in advance. We really need the help.
Hello, Mr. Murphy.
Hello, Elliott to Elliott here.
Yes. Listen to me, I got a problem with you. You took all the L's and all the T's. I only got one of each.
My parents were very generous.
Yeah, they were. Mine were stingy. But you know what? It always came in handy when I had to get like a name bracelet. I was able to save a couple of bucks on that extra L and T.
Well, I have been misspelled in every way possible.
Me too.
Every way. 2 L's, 2 T's, one of each. And
me too.
Even the worst, and sometimes Elio. They write E-L-I-O. Which
wait. I got the best one. Ellie Mae I got once.
Wow. That's only in deepest Appalachia, I think.
Yep. That's the one I use when I go to the cement pond. So how you doing?
I'm doing okay. Fine, Elliott. Thank you.
Beautiful. It's been a long time. I used to work for Epi. I
saw Epi. I mean, I did 2 shows, I think, at his reinvigorated father's place, which is now in a Roslyn hotel.
Right. How do you like it? How do you like the hotel?
You know, it was fine. I mean, the space was nice. We had a really good crowd. I played there right after I had been inducted into the Long Island Music Hall of Fame.
Right.
So that was kind of nice.
Yeah, it is nice. And so your book is great. Great book.
Thank you.
Just so you know, I'm going to tell you this now. My wife is leaving the room now as we're speaking, but Drive All Night is one of her favorite songs in the whole wide world.
Oh, what's her name?
Laura.
Laura. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Laura.
Tell Laura I love her. That was the name of a hit song. It
was a hit song. Tell Laura I love her, yeah. And so we kind of grew up in the same neck of the woods. I grew up in South Belmore, and you came from, the same kind of breeding grounds. In fact, I just spoke to Artie Kornfeld from Woodstock. Do you remember Artie?
I do. I think he was inducted into the Long Island Music Hall of Fame the same night I was.
Yeah, I think he was as well. And
his partner.
His partner was Michael Lang.
Michael Lang, yeah.
Yep, Michael. And Artie is. I'll be doing a show with Artie. I think tomorrow. I do a show with him like once a month. We do just an old. He just talks about whatever comes into his mind, and at this point, anything can come into Artie's mind. And it's pretty a lot of fun.
Does this podcast, is it live?
We're not live now. This is going to be edited, and I'll put it up on the podcast. And I will I'll be playing it live on one of my Sunday night shows. But now we're not live.
I wanted to ask you. You were from South Belmore, did you say, or North Belmore?
South, yeah.
Now, did that touch New Hyde Park or?
No. South Belmore was on the Wantaw, near Wantaw.
Oh, out there. Yeah, I'm thinking of.
Oh, you're thinking of, I don't know what you're thinking of. What are you thinking of by New Hyde Park?
Maybe I was thinking of Belmont Racetrack.
Oh, yeah, Belmont. Yeah, Belmont. Yeah. I was down by Wantaw and Massapequa. I was on the South Shore. You were up
well, I know that very well because we used to go to Jones Beach all the time.
Sure, yeah.
West End 1, West End 2. And when I was a surfer, we used to surf out at Gilgo.
Oh, wow. And you also played in the clubs in Oceanside, didn't you? Long Beach down,
A lot of them, yeah. The Action House.
Action House. And
there was one on in Long Beach, a couple of them, which I didn't know it at the time. They all turned out to be pretty heavily mobbed up, those.
Yeah. Channel 80. Remember Channel 80? And
I don't remember that.
Malibu,
yeah. I was a big fan of the Vagrants, the band, and they used to play at all those places.
Yeah. Leslie's band. So the book is great. I've been following your music for the past, I don't know how many years. And Aquashow is still one of the greatest albums ever made. And
Thank you so much.
yeah, and what I really enjoyed about your book was you went into the nuts and bolts that made that album, which was quite interesting because when I first heard it, I kind of thought you were a kind of like a poet who wasn't happy growing up where you grew up. But what it turned out was, after reading, after going through the book, was that you were very happy where you are, and just the circumstances that surrounded your youth and everything else, with your dad and everything else, kind of made that album what it was. What it is. And,
Really, I think that album served as a kind of a catharsis
yeah.
for me. All those songs I wrote a lot of those songs, as I say in the book, in Europe when I went over there in '71.
Right.
Yeah, that was one of those perfect storms. All good elements came together, and it looked like it was going to be a disaster. It looked like the album would never be made.
Right.
When my failed attempt to do it in LA, but then Peter Siegel, who was the head of A&R at Polydor, he kind of took charge on it.
Right.
And I think as he came from that West Village folk scene in the 60s, I think he understood, what kind of sound I would like. And yeah, to this day, it has not dated, that album.
That album hasn't dated, and there are so many bands working now that are striving for that sound.
Mm.
And it's pretty interesting because, it's kind of like you kind of predated the punk poets that came after you, the Jim Carrolls, those kind of guys. And it was just interesting. I think that album should be one of the most iconic albums. I think it should be on that list that one of those albums that everybody must listen to. It's an incredible album from start to finish. But you did so much after that, and
the downside to that album, honestly, was it was my first album.
Yeah,
it was really hard to know where to go after that because,
yeah,
I went from being totally unknown to being on Robert Hilburn's best albums of the year list.
Yep.
So it was hard to know where to go. I think it took me a little while to get my feet. I went out to the West Coast to do the second album with Paul Rothschild.
Right.
And but yeah, that album has really withstood the test of time. It was very important to me that we wouldn't use any instruments that I felt would become dated. One of them I thought was the clavichord, which was being put on everything at that time.
Right.
So we didn't use that. And also the mix of the musicians, we had Gene Parsons from the Byrds,
right,
playing the drums. We had Frank Owens, who was a New York studio cat who had played with Dylan and everybody. Peter Siegel brought up a guitar player from Nashville who really helped glue the thing together. And it was just all the great talent. And I think, as I said in the book also, the funny thing was Record Plant had two studios. The top one was Studio B, was up on like the 8th floor.
Yep.
And it was like a church where we were recording, And then down on the first floor, the New York Dolls were recording.
Yeah.
Their second album.
Right.
It was like a Roman bacchanal going on down there.
Yeah, that was Too Much Too Soon, right? That was a great album as well.
It was Too Much Too Soon, yeah.
Yeah, that was with Shadow Morton.
Yeah, who I knew of because he used to record at a studio right next to Garden City called Ultrasonic.
Yeah, I remember Ultrasonic. That's
Yeah.
LIR was hooked up with Ultrasonic.
Yeah.
Yeah, those were the days. In fact, I used to do a reggae show with Epi, like at midnight on Sunday nights. We did it for a run. We at LIR for a while. But I remember, I saw you headline a number of times, but I remember seeing you as an opening act for some of the greats.
You said it. I mean, the people that I had the privilege of opening for, the Kinks. We did a lot of shows for the Kinks. We played at Hofstra, opened for the Kinks.
Yep, saw that show. I saw you open for Lou Reed.
Jefferson Starship.
Yep.
And then later on, a lot of the blues legends I opened for. I opened for John Lee Hooker.
Yep.
I opened for Buddy Guy over here, especially over here in Europe, because for some reason I was classified in with those blues guys.
Wait a second. I saw you do a show with Garland Jeffries. And was it Chris Spedding on guitar?
Well, that show was in Switzerland.
Yeah, I got a copy of that.
Yeah, that was a Swiss festival, a huge festival called Hot Point, Lausanne, and they asked me to invite some special guests, and I thought of Garland because we were pals.
Yeah,
and then I wanted a special guest guitarist, and it was going to be Richard Lloyd, from television.
Sure.
And like 2 weeks before, he fell off his bicycle and broke his wrist.
Wow.
So then I reached out. Ernie Brooks, who played bass with me, he had been in a band called The Necessaries with Chris Spedding.
Right.
I knew Chris also from Robert Gordon.
Yeah.
Because my brother Matthew was Robert's tour manager.
That's right.
And so I invited Chris, and man, we did like one rehearsal, and Chris just got it like that. And if you listen to that album, the lead he did on, I think it's on Rock Ballad. It is just like the seminal lead on that song. No one has ever played it better than he did, even though Mick Taylor did the original.
Yeah. Now you opened for Lou at the Rock and Roll Animal tour, right? That was
I forget which show I opened for him.
That was at the what would they call it at the time? The Palladium, but it kept changing names. The Palladium.
Was that? I don't think I opened the one they recorded the album, the Rock and Roll Animal.
Then you also opened for the Dolls.
The Dolls many times.
I saw you open for the Dolls at the Valentine's Day show. The
Academy of Music.
The Palladium, the Academy of Music. Yeah, they kept changing their name. The Palladium became the Academy. But that was
John Rockwell from the Times. He just bombed both of us.
Yeah.
Couldn't have been more nasty than he was in that review.
Great
he
show.
Didn't like the Dolls.
It was a great show. I remember the rafters shaking that night.
He didn't like the Dolls, I don't think, that whole movement of glam rock. So anything associated with them, and I guess I was associated because I opened, he gave us a terrible one of the, the critics have been generally very nice to me through the years.
Right.
But that was one of the worst reviews I ever got. But it was a memorable night. I remember it because Arthur Kane, the bass player from the Dolls, his girlfriend, in some kind of drunken argument, had tried to cut off his thumb while he was asleep and passed out.
Wow.
So he showed up. This was the night before. He showed up at the gig with his hand in a bandage like this.
Right.
And the bass player, I forget the roadie. Sorry, not the bass player. The roadie, whose name I think was Jordan somebody. He stood behind the bass amp and he played the bass the whole show.
Yep. And that was Valentine's Day, right? That was
Valentine's.
St. Valentine's Day Massacre. The movie started the show. It was quite an event. But yeah, I know. Kane used to steal. What's his name? Overend Watts' boots. I heard when they opened for Mott. He would steal
platform boots like that.
Steal the platform boots from Overend because they were both big guys.
Yeah,
and he couldn't get boots. Well, I guess he could have gone boots, but it was a lot easier to steal them from Watts. And Kane used to steal Watts' boots. I heard that from Morgan Fisher.
The Dolls had a very checkered, infamous and celebratory past. I know when they came to Paris for the first time, I heard this from the guy who was working for the record company here and accompanied them. Like they stayed in one of those big 5-star hotels where anything on the hotel, you could put it on the room charge.
Right.
That included the gift shop, the perfume store. And they charged up like $10,000 worth of stuff on that. And I think the guy was afraid he was going to lose his job. But
that sounds like the Dolls.
Yeah, we were managed by the same management company, Lieber and Krebs. And that's how we.
Yeah, they were iconic. They were iconic management.
They managed Aerosmith, and that's how I really got put together with them. That's how I began kind of my relationship with David Johansen. We were both had this local bar called Tramps, which we both used to play at in the 80s. We had a one-night band called the French Ticklers.
Yep.
Which was me and David and the late great Sylvain.
Yeah.
I thought that was going to turn into a band, but David went another direction.
Yeah, Tramps was great. I remember the Uptown Horns was pretty much the house band there.
Oh yeah, yeah, they were.
You know, I
They
spoke
were.
to Crispin, I spoke to Arno, great guys, and they have great stories. You know, about their Tuesday night things there. You know, every Tuesday the Uptown Horns would kind of
Yeah.
that was their residence, and yeah. And I remember seeing you there, and in fact, I remember in the book you were talking about Tramps, how that was one of the reasons why you left the States, right? You just kind of you were hitting a dead end, right?
You know, after being on three major labels in the 70s and four albums, I kind of hit a wall, you know.
Yeah.
The sales never met the expectations.
Well,
What I wasn't,
you were cursed. They gave you that Bob Dylan curse. The next Bob Dylan. I mean, I think the only person that ever lived through that was Bruce, and he took a year or two off, right, when they hit him with that title.
well, Bruce, it was definitely the opposite of whatever a curse could be.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But you know, the interesting about that thing, and I often talked about this with Bruce many times. So you had Bruce Springsteen, myself, John Prine,
Yep.
Loudon Wainwright III,
Yep.
and a little later Tom Petty, and we were all got this new Bob Dylan tag,
Yep.
but none of us sound like each other,
No.
not at all.
No.
And I think we all kind of were similar to Bob at certain points in his career.
Yeah.
But I think what it really was more than anything else, you know, for the most part, and I hate to say this, but the lyrics in pop music, you know, were so minimal. We're so Moon, June, and Spoon. I mean, they were just not very literary back there. And Bob really opened the door to whatever you would consider poetry to be in rock and roll. And I think all of us put a lot of attention to our words. So that was really, and it was such an easy catchphrase.
Yeah, it was. The Birds, you know, prior to you, had,
Yeah.
you know, were you know, had
Yeah.
that crown for a short time. Let me ask you a question while we're on going back in time a bit. You're a Beatle fan.
Of course.
Okay. I ask this to everybody, and I'm planning on maybe putting together what everybody's talking. You know, what the answers I get on this is. Your what do you think was the most influential Beatle album? They're all amazing. There's not a bad album in the mix, but if you were to say this is the one that separated them from the rest of the pack, what would it be?
Well, interesting question. I mean, they were separated from the rest of the pack from their first album.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah. But which is
there were the Beatles and there was everybody else coming
yeah?
from England. But
But
for me personally,
which Beatle album separated them from themselves, so to speak?
it was Rubber Soul.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, I thought that was where they really gelled as a band, and everything about that album seemed to me to be perfect.
Yeah.
From the cover,
Uh-huh.
the iconic cover photo. I think Norwegian Wood was on that
Yes,
album.
it was.
You Won't See Me, was that on that album?
Yep. Yeah, I've just seen a face.
I've just seen a face. So for me, that album just flowed from, you know, side one, track one to the last thing on side two. And they really sounded like a band on that album. That is to this day my favorite Beatles album. I understand how important Sgt. Pepper.
See,
But-
I thought Revolver would be that's mine, Revolver.
Runs a close second, very close second.
And that's everybody gives me those same two albums, Rubber Soul and Revolver. And
Yeah.
I think Revolver is the one that gave them permission to go in any direction they wanted to. That was their experimental album. I think
Yeah.
everybody who came after them had permission to, you know, become a studio band as opposed to a performing band, so to speak. You know, Good Vibrations came after that. You know, great stuff came after that. And yeah, and how about solo work? Beatles solo work. There's so much to pick from, but I mean,
There is so much to pick from.
I'll tell you mine. I'll tell you mine. All Things
Okay.
Must Pass.
Well, the All Things Must Pass was the big surprise.
Yeah.
But I think Keith Richards said the reason that album was so great was because George had so many songs the Beatles wouldn't let him put on the album.
Yeah, exactly. He came out of the box with just a library of incredible tunes that he was sitting on for X amount of years. He was allowed two songs on every album, and he just stockpiled them.
I love that. And then he was playing also with all those great American musicians. You know, he
Yeah.
kind of hooked up with, I don't know if Jim Gordon or Mike Keltner or all for the drums. They were all great
He
musicians.
had the Dominoes on that band. Half that
Yeah.
became the Dominoes. Part of that band became Rolling Stone backup people.
Yeah.
It was just Cocker took part of that band. Everybody
Yeah.
grabbed that band and ran with it.
I think it was the first time I heard Jim Gordon on the drums.
Yeah,
And then he joined Derek and the Dominoes, and he
and
played on my second album.
that's right. And also, Bobby Whitlock was on that album.
Bobby Whitlock was
Now,
on that album.
Bobby told me a story that Jagger used to hang out at those sessions, and he would tell Bobby, "Can you play me a gospel tune?" And some of the stuff that Bobby actually laid down on keyboards became songs like "All Down the Line" for the Stones, for Exile. A lot of Exile came from those sessions that were All Things Must Pass originally, and it was
Well,
just
there's a story. Ry Cooder says he used to be jamming in the studio, and he thinks they recorded it all and then served as inspirations. But you know what they say, Elliot? They say amateurs are influenced and professionals steal. So
that's right, that's right. But they did that little knockoff album, Jamming with Edward. You remember?
that's right, yeah.
With Cooder, right? Roy was on that album.
But as much as I love that album, John Lennon, he with the breakup of the Beatles, he just became more John Lennon than he ever was before.
Right.
I felt like his personality just became even larger than life in his albums, whereas the rest kind of stayed where you thought they were going to be.
Yeah.
But John Lennon, he just went places where no man had gone before.
Yeah, I think he had the most prolific. I mean, McCartney got pigeonholed into that whole pop sound. He became pop, genius that's what you like. But Lennon actually did. He did a lot of great music.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, I saw Lennon when he played the Garden for that 1-to-1 benefit. I don't know if you were probably still in New York for that. The Willowbrook.
Was that with Elephant's Memory backing him?
Yeah, it was awful. It was
Because they were a Lieber Krebs band too.
Yeah, they were. And I'll tell you a funny story. I was working with Michael Shreve from Santana,
Oh yeah.
and he was putting together a band. It became Novo Combo, a pop band. And a lot of the Elephant Memory guys were coming into audition, and they would come in one at a time because they didn't want the other guys in the band knowing they were coming in. And they would say to him, "I know I'm not good enough to play with you, but I just wanted to tell people that I actually sat in with Michael Shreve, But yeah, none of the guys got the gig. But yeah, it was really funny. They'd come in one at a time, and they would tell you if anybody else comes in, you didn't see me, that kind of thing.
I was fortunate. I met all the Beatles but George Harrison.
Really?
Although he was my favorite Beatle because he was the guitarist. And
Wow.
when I was 16, my father bought me a guitar just like his, a Gretsch Tennessean. But I met them all, John and Paul a couple of times, and Ringo, of course.
Yeah. Well, I remember your dad's restaurant in the Garden City, right on Old Country Road.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. I remember.
On top of the Franklin National Bank building. And he used to organize a thing that was called college mixers.
Uh-huh.
That they would have, I think, in Saturday afternoons or Sunday afternoons. And because there was Hofstra College near there and Adelphi and CW Post.
Yep.
They would put these flyers at all those schools, and they would have live music. I remember the Ronettes played one of them. Maybe the Billy Joel played one of them with the Hassles.
Well,
and that was kind of my first introduction. I used to hang out. I was a kid. I mean, I was 16, 15, and I used to hang out in the dressing rooms. And I saw there was a lot of waiting.
Yeah, a lot of waiting. Yep,
a lot of waiting to go on.
Yeah, there is a lot of waiting, and that's when you get into trouble. The waiting is
the Tom Petty song. The waiting is the hardest part.
Yeah, that's when you get into trouble. Yeah, I used to work for Franklin National Bank when I was in college, and they became. Franklin National became that European. I forgot what they changed their name to. It became a European bank.
I think they went down the tubes in scandal or something, didn't they?
Yeah, right, with the Vatican. Something with the Vatican.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they
and my
European something they changed. Had to
something
change
like
it.
that.
Yeah. I worked in the branch by the racetrack. They had like this little MasterCard branch off of Country Road. But yeah, we used to go to that to the main building a lot. So, you did the whole round in New York. You started at the Mercer Arts. Was that pretty much one of your first big?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was a great little place before it was burnt to the ground or whatever happened.
What happened to the Mercer? It was the backside of a building that was also called the University Hotel, I think.
Yeah, yeah,
It was kind of a flop house on
yeah,
the other side on Broadway,
yeah.
and that collapsed, and with it the Mercer. But the Mercer was the guy who booked that. What was his name? Michael somebody, and he had a very liberal booking policy, and if he liked you, you could get a gig there, and the Dolls played there.
Sure.
I remember seeing the Dolls and Jonathan Richman, Modern Lovers, playing there.
Yeah.
Patti Smith played there. I played there. But the biggest band who came out of the Mercer Arts Center was Kiss.
Yeah, that's right. Bill
Yeah.
Aucoin, right? He had that band. And
Yeah.
yeah, and that's right. They did come from there, but they didn't have the same punk, for lack of a better term, that whole punk influence thing never hit Kiss. They just
Well, I don't, punk didn't really exist when I was playing there.
no,
I mean,
no, it didn't.
first of all, there were the dandies. I always consider myself more dandy. I said that the glam movement, they were like dandies with no taste,
Uh-huh.
But first they were dead, and then the punks were when you ripped everything up and put safety pins through it.
Yeah,
That really started more in CBGBs.
right. And
Yes,
you,
I played more the Mercer, Max's Kansas City, quite in both eras.
yeah.
The Bitter End, some of those Kenny's Castaways.
Do you remember the Winkies, Phil Rambo's band, Philip Rambo?
That name sounds familiar.
Philip Rambo had a tune. They backed Eno for a while, for a very short time.
Mm.
And then Eno's lungs collapsed, and he had to cancel the tour. It was right when he left Roxy. But he had a tune, "Fallen,"
Mm-hmm.
and that was Rambo's thing. He came from that whole thing too, at a Mercer. But your sound wasn't like the other. You really weren't a punk rocker. You really weren't. You were more of a poet. You were more of a when they say Dylan, you did have not that sound, but that attitude. You were more interested in writing great tunes, and it was more of a lyrical thing and everything else. So I could.
Well, the thing I had was I had that harmonica around my neck.
Yeah.
At that time, it was iconic for Bob Dylan. Since that time, of course, Neil Young plays with a harp like that. Bruce does. Everybody does.
Yeah, Donovan did too.
Donovan did too. And I started that because right before that, I was in Europe for a year and I was playing on the streets and I just wanted to make as much noise as possible. Started playing the harmonica. But I think so for the look more than anything else. And then the cover of Aquashow.
Beautiful.
I had asked the photographer, or the art designer, the graphic designer, if we could put this kind of fog around the edges, because that's what the Rolling Stones had done. I think it was for Aftermath or Between the Buttons.
It was Between the Buttons. The hazy, yeah.
The hazy thing. And that's where I got the idea. But then when it came out, I realized Bob Dylan had done the same thing around.
Yeah.
I guess it's bringing it all back home.
Right. Yeah.
So that was another thing. But
yeah. What kind of harmonicas do you play?
These days I play Lee Oscar.
Whoa, I just hung up with Lee.
You just what?
I just hung up with Lee 2 minutes before I spoke to you.
Well, tell him I'm a fan of his harmonicas. I've been using them for years, and I'd love to be sponsored by them.
Wait a minute, he's sponsoring me now. Wait, I don't know if you
All right.
See the autograph?
Yeah. Let me see. Okay. Well, just to show you.
Yeah. Lee signed this one up here. I got Lee's autograph up here. I'll tell him he's they're always looking for musicians. It's really funny.
Sure, I'd love to.
Yeah.
I may be one of the few. I'm not really I can play blues harp, but I mainly play in the rack and I mainly play straight harp.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. Yeah, I'm a good friend of Lee's. I met Lee a couple of years ago, and we just kind of hit it off. And great guy, great musician. What a harp player he is.
Oh yeah.
He's putting out an album, in fact, next month. It's called Never Forget, about the Holocaust.
Hmm.
His mom was in Dachau, and so yeah, the whole thing. He's just kind of putting an album called Never Forget. Um,
Where is he from, Lee Oscar?
Belgium.
Belgium. Okay. Yeah.
He's living in he's in Oregon now.
Belgium has a tradition of great harmonica players. Didn't Toots
Yeah. Well,
Hielman?
well, he said that every kid on the block had a harmonica. It was like, you were born in Belgium, here, have a harmonica, that kind of thing. And
In the late 60s, when the blues started and you had Paul Butterfield playing the harmonica.
yeah.
And then there was a great book called, I think it was called Blues Harp, and it was written by Tony Little Son Glover.
Uh-huh.
Do you know who that was?
No.
He was a friend of Bob Dylan's from out in Minneapolis. I think he went to the University of Minneapolis. And that book, it was like a history of the blues more than blues harmonica. And everyone I knew in the late 60s had that book, and we were learning how to play the harp through that.
Oh, well, I'm a piano player, so that's how I learned. It was kind of like, you fall off the piano, you could kind of pick up anything a little. You don't become an expert. It's like a jack of all trades. I could play anything, but
Uh-huh.
I'm not proficient at anything. So, it's that kind of thing. So yeah, so you've put out like a album almost every year, right? You're really proficient when it comes
I
to.
tried to once I got going, because once I left kind of the major label world,
Mhm.
I had to figure out, but I started coming to Europe to play because, unbeknownst to me, those albums had been pretty successful over here.
Yeah.
Especially the last one, Just Story from America. There was a song called Anastasia, which was kind of a hit.
Right.
In France, the first time I came to play here in '79, I thought I was going to be in a little club, and it was like 1,000 people in the audience. And I think I did 6 encores because I just didn't want to leave the stage.
Wow.
And I saw that in Europe they had a different way of doing it, because there were so many small markets. Artists would produce their own album and then license to different labels. So if you could get up the money to produce your own album, then you could license it. So that's what I started doing.
Okay.
And once I realized I could do that, and then you really had no one telling you what kind of album you had to make, or Columbia saying, we got too many releases in January, you're going to have to wait
Right.
till June. It was very the amount of freedom was incredible. So I would find a good recording situation, and I would just try and get one out, as long as the songs kept coming.
Yeah.
That was the main thing. That's the oil well that keeps the whole thing going. That's got to keep pumping.
And you've been blessed. You've been putting them out.
I have been blessed. I haven't, of course, the COVID has slowed me down a little bit, in that
Right.
the record stores were all closed here for a little while.
Right.
We did put out with my longtime guitarist, I put out an album, a spoken word album of poetry, and he made the music, Olivier Durand. That's called Middle Kingdom.
Uh-huh.
And that came out in November. And we did a limited run, and we're almost sold out on that, which is very gratifying. But hope to get back into the studio within the next 2 months to start album 36 or something.
Well, I thought you were up into 40s.
Well, I don't count the live ones or the
Oh, okay.
best one. I did a series of vintage albums of outtakes and stuff, and I did 10 of those. So I guess, okay, we'll get into the 40s if we can.
Yeah, let's call it 40s. It sounds better, right? 30s.
Sounds better. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah. So, how do you find living in I guess you love living in France. You've been there for a while.
As I said, Elliott, I first came here in 1971 to Europe. Was playing in the streets, and I liked Europe. I liked the lifestyle. The sense of history all around me, and I guess especially that they were open to my music later on.
Why is that? Why do the Europeans? Why are they so much more open than we are in the States? It's always been that way. It's been that way from day one, and what's the difference? Is it a culture? Obviously, it's culture, but why?
Well, it's interesting you use that word culture, because I think here they consider rock and roll and blues and jazz, all that, part of culture.
Uh-huh.
America is part of show business.
Yeah.
And I think that's a different angle on it, which makes them.
I mean, even the old jazz guys were able to make it in Europe and not here, you know?
Oh yeah, I mean, and Miles Davis, he was like a god here. He would play
Right.
the Montreux Jazz Festival every year, and they supply him with a Ferrari at the airport.
Well,
I played the Montreux Jazz Festival too. They didn't give me a Ferrari, I gotta say.
okay.
But and also, if you take a country like Spain, Spain was totally closed to rock and roll while Franco was still there.
Yeah.
And I mean, he used to take Beatles albums. They used to take off certain cuts, so when you'd actually see the vinyl, there'd be a blank circle where some cuts would be, because he didn't like what those lyrics would said. So when I came to Spain in 82, it was like the first generation of rock music that hit them.
Well, so, but it's been that way for ages. That it just seems that even our artists here tend to have more respect when they go over to Europe. It's
Well, and the really odd thing about that is the artists who seem to get the most respect in Europe are those who put the most emphasis on their lyrics, which their audiences in Europe can hardly understand those lyrics.
Did you ever run across a guy named Tony Levin when you were there in Europe? Do you know Tony?
I know a Tony, a bass player.
I'm sorry, not Tony Levin. Jackie Levin.
Jackie Levin, yeah.
Jackie Levin.
From Ireland.
Yeah, from Ireland. He passed away a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I did some shows with him, in fact.
Okay, Jackie was incredible. What an artist he was. And,
great artist, yeah.
He had that punk band called Doll by Doll for a while.
Yeah, sad when he passed away. We did, I'm trying to remember where we played together. It could have been in Switzerland, but I did know him.
Yeah, but his music never would have made it here, and he kind of reminds me of what you bring to the table. He was a great lyricist, a great artist. He could have done it on his own if he had to. He didn't need a band behind him. Mm-hmm. When he did, it was just a plus. And, artists like that just don't make it. Who do you feel is going to be, are there any up-and-coming artists now that you would put your faith behind?
Very good question and hard to answer.
Mm-hmm.
I would have to say, I would not have been accepted in Europe, though, if I had not had first kind of the critical acclaim I had in America.
Mm-hmm.
So when I came here, everybody knew who I was. And I also started in an era where rock critics really swayed a lot of weight with their reviews. The Aquashow had the lead-off review in Rolling Stone. And
right.
When they pay attention to that in Europe. I don't think today critics mean anything as far as music. They're really just a part of the promotional team now.
Right, because anybody could be a critic today.
Anybody can be a critic. Anybody's voice can be heard. Yeah. So who is there up and coming? I would, they asked, who was it? The great, a great artist, the one who put his name on the toilet bowl and put it in the, put it in the famous Armory show. Who was that?
Oh,
come on! Between two Elliots, we should think.
Yeah, I'm blanked on that. Wait, hold on. Well, tell the story and I'll find it for us.
Okay. He was asked where he thought the next great artist was going to come from.
Okay.
And this was in the 50s. He was asked this question, and he said, "Today, and this is the 50s." He said, "Anyone who's good is immediately totally overexposed." So he says it's probably going to have to come from someone who is so down deep in the underground. So I don't think I would probably even be aware of anyone who would whose work is still going to be listened to in 100 years.
Well, who are you listening to these days?
I listened to
Duchamp?
Marcel Duchamp. That was him, yeah. That was who they asked. And there was, or was it Man Ray? Because I think Man Ray was from Brooklyn.
Yeah, no, it was
Duchamp who did that. That's who they asked about.
Marcel Duchamp.
Marcel Duchamp. I listen to two kinds of music, Elliot. I listen to the music kind of from my roots, you know.
Huh?
I listen to Bruce and the Stones and Dylan, and then I have a son, Gaspar,
Right.
who's a producer and a mixer, and then I listen to the things which he says I should listen to. So I kind of skipped about 3 generations. You know, he will tell me, especially in the hip hop world, he'll tell me I should listen to this or that, and I do. And so he's the one who exposes me to other music. But I think, like everyone else in my generation, I'm a Spotify listener now. And I pick out a tune I like, and it just kind of takes me on a voyage with other tunes that it seems to fit in, you know. I was a huge fan of Bruce's, not his last album, but the one, although I love the last album, the one, Western Skies.
Right.
Love that. And the cinematic. And I've been listening to a lot of like Ennio Morricone,
Uh-huh.
that kind of soundtrack music.
Yeah, I love the spaghetti western. I love that
Oh,
spaghetti
man.
western sound, the twangy guitars and
Playing the harmonica and
yeah, yeah.
I love that. So yeah, that's what I listen to. And I'm trying to think how best to answer that question. So
It's hard, right? There's really not a lot.
it's hard, you know. It's been a long time since I bought a CD.
Yeah.
I listen mainly online and streaming and download. I do sell CDs after shows because people,
Sure.
you know, a CD after the show has almost become like a T-shirt, you know.
Yeah. Yep. And it's
And I love it too because I managed to I can get out there and say hello to the fans and, you know, get to know them. And I just have, you know, this incredible group of fans here in Europe, from some of them who come to like 40 shows a year. I used to when I was doing shows.
yeah.
And so I really like that. So I'm going to have to get back to you. But geez, is there a guy named Kurt Weill? Not Weill, Kurt Weill.
Yes.
I think of his nickname.
Kurt Weill does he live in Jersey? I think he comes out of Jersey
Yeah,
from Gem Records.
I think so. I really like something he did. I listened to that a lot.
Yeah. Yep. Kurt. Yeah. What's the name of that band? Not the Gold Needles. It's part of that whole group, though. It's I'll tell you in a second. Yeah, I deal with Gem. I'll tell you in a second who it is.
I listened to more country music than ever, old country music
Uh-huh.
than I used to.
It's weird, isn't it, that like the further we get down the line, we go back further. It's like as I get older, I'm going back in music, even pre-60s, pre-50s.
Yeah.
You know, it's like there's nothing. There's nothing new that kind of interests me. There are some great bands out there. There's a lot of great, like the Ozric Tentacles. They're a great band. They're an instrumental band that kind of came out of that Canterbury sound. You know,
Okay.
like a lot of marijuana smoking, that type of crowd, and it was, some interesting things. The Ozric Tentacles are named after a fictitious breakfast cereal. And they come out of England. They're a pretty cool band. And there's a couple of bands, but I'm still listening. I speak to Chris Spedding every now and then.
Yeah.
I still listen to Chris's stuff. I still listen to the old Roxy stuff.
But that's, I'm a guitar player, and I always love the guitar. And there's less than that. Someone was I think it was Alejandro Escovedo, who I love. Great artist.
Yeah, he is.
He was saying at the last South by Southwest he went to, there were so few, 2 guitars, bass, and drums bands.
Right.
Just doesn't exist.
It's because people are too lazy to learn how to play guitar now. They'll sit down they'll sit at their computer with a keyboard. They'll buy a $40 keyboard and a little program, and they become musicians in 3 days.
Although I have a lot of trouble with those keyboards and the Logic Pro. I got to ask my son how to do everything. Yeah. But it's interesting what you were saying about going back, because what blows my mind is, okay, here we are in 2021. I did my first album in 1973.
Right.
So if you take that same time span, someone who's doing their first album now, it's the same as someone who I met in 73 who did their first album in 1920.
Right.
I
know.
Rock and roll, because that music it holds on, but it's definitely from a different era.
Yes.
Whereas music from the 70s, it has stayed relevant in some way.
Yep, it did.
Almost like bebop jazz from the 50s has stayed relevant, and country music from the 50s, and Hank Williams. Hank Williams and all that.
And
So
the blues from the 20s and 30s.
and the greatest example, of course, is Robert Johnson.
Sure. Now, what people saying? The Beatles, who their first album came out in what, 63, right? When they came to the States. Look how far back that is from where we are now.
And to think had such a short career.
9 years, right? 6 years. 6 years.
Yeah, although I guess they were together for quite a few years.
Yeah, but their recording life was 6 years.
6 years,
Yeah. 13 albums in 6 years, I think, or whatever it was.
I loved what Mick Jagger said about that.
Yeah.
Someone asked him, there was some question about it, who did he thought was the greater band, the Beatles or the Stones? And he said, well, one band is still filling stadiums and the other band doesn't exist anymore.
I know. Well, yeah. Well, Mick and Keith always had a little, like, kind of sand in their shorts of the Beatles.
Yeah.
There was a little animosity, but not taking anything away from the Stones, but I kind of feel like the Stones became an oldies band at this point. I mean, they sell stadiums, but, there's really nothing new worthwhile since God knows.
It's a problem.
Hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember that this radio show is listener funded. If you wish to contribute, our PayPal info is notyourmothersradio@gmail.com. That's notyourmothersradio@gmail.com. We would like to thank you in advance for any contributions.